Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we will dive into a very exciting topic from AI roadmap to AI reinvention, empowering people at the point of work. This session is eligible for HRCI, SHRM, and ATD professional development credits. Now let's meet today's speakers. We have Ross Crooke, SVP, BTS Europe, Fredrik Schuller, EVP, Global Head of Centers of Excellence at BTS, and David Forey, SVP and Principal Analyst at Brennan Hall Group. A huge shout out to today's webinar sponsor, BTS. BTS is a global consultancy that helps organizations turn strategy into action by equipping their people with the skills, mindsets, and behaviors to lead, sell, and perform when it counts. BTS partners with senior leaders and teams to accelerate leadership performance, drive transformation, and create lasting business impact from the C-suite to the front line. Please be sure to visit them at www.bts.com. Before we dive into today's content, let me tell you about Brennan Hall Group and some incredible opportunities that could accelerate your career. Brennan Hall Group is a leading professional development firm that has been serving learning, talent, and HR executives worldwide for more than 30 years. We've advanced the growth and performance of millions of employees and leaders through our cloud-based platform, delivering evidence-based research, data, and certification programs that empower organizations to achieve excellence in every area of human capital management. Our impact spans more than 10 million employees and executives globally, supported by a comprehensive research library, strategic insights, and prestigious awards program. Below is a sample of the organizations we are proud to partner with. We have incredible learning and networking opportunities. Registration is still open for our HCM Excellence Conference happening in just 2 weeks, February 9th through 12th. This is where the top minds in human capital management come together. We also have 2 of our BRIC events happening this year, our AI Summit on October 15th and 16th, and our Leadership Summit on November 18th. All details and applications for everything I've mentioned will be available in a PDF you'll receive within 24 hours after the webinar. We are excited to share that at the end of today's webinar, we will be selecting one lucky raffle winner to win $100 off a Brennan Hall Group Institute membership. Stay tuned to see if you are the lucky winner. You must be present to win. Now, just a few quick things to note. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the questions panel in your control bar. We'll be answering them throughout the session. We're also recording today's webinar, and you'll receive an email within 24 hours with a link to the recording and the PDF of the slides. The chat box is open, so feel free to share your thoughts as we go along. Your input makes this more valuable for everyone. Now, I would like to pass things off to David Forey.
Thank you, Ivy, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm David Forey, Senior Vice President and Principal Analyst at Brennan Hall Group. I spend most of my time working with HR, talent, learning, and business leaders who are trying to turn big ideas, especially around AI, into real measurable impact. Looks like we already have a poll. So before we dive in, I want to get a quick sense of where you're coming from as an audience. So there's no right or wrong answer here. It's really understanding where organizations are right now. So I'm sure if you all see it on your screen, you probably already started taking it. But how would you rate your organization's current AI maturity? And I think this is a great opportunity to meet our panel. So if you each can introduce yourself and share what you're working on at BTS.
Hey, I'm Fredrik Schuller. Nice to meet you all. I lead the firm's global centers of excellence across leadership, strategy, transformation, assessments, and AI as part of the executive team. So I'm responsible for evolving the BTS global portfolio and accelerating the integration of AI in all our products and solutions and increase the impact of our work. And I've been with BTS for 22 years, believe it or not. I started in San Francisco, but I currently live outside of Oslo in Norway, in my home country.
And I'm Ross Crooke. I'm here in 2 roles. Firstly, I'm customer zero for AI at BTS. So I work with a lot of our internal teams in sales and marketing, finance, operations, and lead our efforts to scale and deploy and get value out of AI within BTS. And then secondly, I'm leading our AI adoption services for our clients as well. So talking to them about their efforts and how we can support them in realizing the value of AI across all of the different clients that we work with as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you both, and look forward to this webinar. It's really designed to be very conversational, so it's not a slide-heavy webinar. Ivy, if you want to share the results of the poll with everyone. So we have 28% are on that reactive ad hoc role, 34% are standardized, 21% are defined or strategic. And then 14% are managed and transformational. So we do have some at that optimized. Would love to hear more from you in the chat as we go along and as we have this conversation. And this is very typical of and consistent with what we see in many organizations, sitting around that standardized and defining role. So they're seeing some success in pockets, but struggling to scale. And I think today we're going to spend most of our time with that and a few glimpses into more of those advanced organizations that are doing things differently. And I do want to hear from those 3%ers that are doing things exceptionally well. We can all learn from you. So let's kick it off with a question. Ross, I think when you look at organizations that are seeing some early success with AI, but can't seem to scale it, what's really getting in the way for organizations?
I think we probably see three different types of AI approach, and the one that's been most exciting recently has been personal productivity. So people using Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude on their own as part of their day-to-day workflow, but it's kind of turned into a little bit like a Google search. So use it to summarize documents, create documents, write your emails a little bit better, and people are noticing an uplift, but not quite the returns that the business is expecting to get from AI breakthroughs. You've had like the traditional AI, so machine learning, custom models, predictions, and like the traditional AI approach is also like what we would call big AI, where people are trying to do very hard things for the enterprise at scale. And that like has had some huge breakthrough successes, but also still a lot of failures. It's still very, very hard to do it well, and also relies on things like having the right architecture. People are still cleaning their data, and they've been cleaning it for many, many years. And then in the last 6 months, maybe 12 months, you're seeing this middle section of teams and workflows and agentic AI and connecting tools and connectors to LLMs and really being able to transform how teams work. And I think we saw it first in software, where you have developers now producing 5 times, 10 times as fast or as much code as they were beforehand, and agents running in the background in parallel or autonomously. And we're starting to see that coming into other functions, other operations as well. So I think on the right-hand side, you've got like workflows, not having the confidence to rethink how your workflow works with AI, but just simply putting AI on top of something. And then the last bit, it's quite hard to do that kind of work top down. And so you really need to give the teams on the front lines or doing the work or deep in the processes the confidence and permission to explore, to experiment, to try new tools. And if you just have one tool enterprise-wide top down, we see that as like a bit limitation in terms of the creativity people can bring or the experimentation that they can initiate.
Yeah, I certainly think a lot of people are out there looking for that AI assistant, to help them with their task, and then, going into more of like an AI agent and acting on our behalf. But, that isn't something exactly that's scalable for organization-wide use. That's, something that helps you as a person. But when we talk about more of that AI impact, moving from pockets or like individual people, to scaling something more enterprise with more enterprise capabilities. Why is that scale aspect so difficult for organizations?
I think it's proving challenging because a lot of people are treating it a little bit like a new tech implementation. And so we're seeing a lot of the funding and investment going into the technology, and the technology is amazing. But to get the transformational breakthroughs, we realize that it's a people opportunity rather than a tech opportunity. And we see in Deloitte CTO, for example, said 93% of the investment is going into the tech and 7% is going into the people who need to use that tech. And so actually rethinking how you work is a real human challenge. And doing that at scale is a huge challenge. And I think internally we've seen the same kind of thing. So we signed a big contract for ChatGPT for everybody, and people get a little bit of personal productivity out of it. We've also been trying to do big AI and have machine learning doing some processes for us. And again, a little bit hit and miss. And then we've seen, like in your final stage, we've seen teams redefining their workflows, and we have new talent models and new operating models and things that we used to take 5 or 6 weeks to do for a client, we can now do in 12 hours. And so that totally changes the work we can do, the clients we can work with, how our teams work, what we hire for. And so that's in like one part of the organization. But we found it's also very much a team sport. It's not like a master plan that you guide through your organization in a hierarchical kind of way. It's much more bottoms up, much more fun, much more team based. But it's a lot of hard work to actually rethink how the change happens.
Yeah, and I think a couple tools that you talked about, a lot of people that are Microsoft shops obviously are leaning on that Copilot, so they're seeing metrics like amount of times used or time saved writing an email. But that doesn't really get into that productivity. What are people replacing it? I think lots of organizations are still trying to figure out what they're measuring when it comes to their AI usage. But there are some organizations that are doing this well. And what would you say some of the signals start to appear before financial ROI? Because you did talk about that measurable, that ROI. What tells leaders they're on the right path in their AI journey?
I think the first sign we found is that people are finding it fun. They're like enjoying tinkering. They're enjoying having permission to explore. I think a lot of people have explored these tools and used these tools in their own personal lives. So you get people taking a photograph of their refrigerator contents and say, "Make me a recipe," and they're coming to work and finding that they can't do any of that because it's all locked down and they don't have permission to do like the equivalent of that. So if you can manage to free them up, and that's really the kind of first sign that they're kind of getting into it. They're enjoying it. They find they have permission. They've got confidence to explore. They're not waiting for permission from someone to say, this is what you should be doing next, but they're actually surfacing these things to the team and feel that they have ownership of their work and how they do it. I think the second phase we see is like people see the cost savings quite quickly, but then fairly soon after that, people reimagine what they can do with the capacity that they've got. And so it's much more if one of your sales team is suddenly twice as productive as they were before, you can afford to have twice as many salespeople because they're twice as valuable. And so a lot of people initially are kind of saying like, let's stop hiring entry-level workers, for example. But we're finding our best ideas come from people who are fearless, fresh thinkers straight out of college. And we find our software developers and our salespeople are much more productive with these tools. So instead of going for cost savings, we're actually saying like, let's get as many of these people who can adopt AI tools and use them productively as we can.
Great insights. And I feel like what you're describing is the difficulty from moving from pockets of a success to that enterprise-wide impact. And that's something that we see over and over at Brandon Hall Group when we are doing our research, when we're talking with organizations that are coming to us for that membership model. And what we typically share is our AI progression model. And this chart on the next slide shows the progression that we've mapped out from our research. And I'm not going to go through all of the phases here today, but it's not so much of a maturity curve. That's initially what we called it. And we said that's unfair to organizations to say that everyone is on a maturity curve because everybody uses AI a little differently. And it's based on your organization and how you're going to be most productive with it. So what we're looking at are a couple of things within organizations. Of course, you have that people process technology embedded in there, but you also have the governance and the overall readiness of an organization. And as organizations progress on this model, AI doesn't just become more advanced. Work really gets redesigned, decision-making shifts, leadership behavior changes, and governance evolves from control, as you mentioned, Ross, to more of that enablement. So the change that we see is that technology often moves faster than the people in the process, and the readiness lags behind, whether it's skills or confidence, operating models, and of course, those guardrails. So organizations end up stalling, and this model simply helps us to see where those gaps exist and why scaling AI requires all of these elements to advance together. So, Fredrik, I'd like to bring in some of your perspective here. For us, phase 3 is kind of like that magic moment for many organizations. And based on the poll results, these are our 5 phases, if you guys all caught on, right? And we saw people gravitate towards that 2 and 3 with a couple of percentages in that 4. So, really talking about 3, that's kind of where the magic happens. So where AI is more of a strategic part of the business, what is fundamentally different and how leaders show up and how people experience AI within their organization?
Yeah. So there are different roles that leaders need to play here. And I maybe give some examples here. Ross just talked about how we often think about technologies and their use in organizations. We associate that with big technology implementations that come from the top. And at least in my experience with those, it's not about the technology adjusting to me. It's about me adopting whatever way that we need to work that technology is set up to do. So we're usually on kind of receiving end of technology in organizations. And with AI, it's different. But so many people carry with them the mindsets of those old behemoth tech transformations that we've done. But it works fundamentally different. So what we found is that if you give people powerful AI tools, it's incredible what they can do. And then it follows kind of a predictable curve. When you give them powerful AI tools, the first intuition is actually to recreate what they do today. So they recreate, they ask, like, can the AI do what I do today faster and better? And that drives some productivity and impact, but only when you start refocusing on the outcomes that you want and reimagining how to get there did you get the real breakthrough. And this is a difficult new muscle for a lot of organizations to build. So it requires both a stronger ability to structure problems, to have a systemic thinking, use judgment in a different way, and using innovation approaches to reimagine how to get there. And then, of course, you need to understand the technology to see what's possible and what's not impossible. When we were prepping for this, you said that everyone thought everything was possible at the beginning of the year, and then they imagined that there are actually restrictions to what the tools can do. So let me give you an example of us internally. So one of our core methodologies when we help our clients in our work is that we use simulations, leadership simulations, business simulations, strategy simulations. And we have fundamentally changed how we develop them. But for the last 22 years that I've been with BTS, the way we develop them haven't changed that much. They take so much time, they take so much investment, which would make them, it made it a little bit prohibitively to scale really big. But now, so we start to think, can AI change how we develop simulations? And first, the team started to recreate the process that we were doing. Tried one tool, didn't work. Tried another tool, didn't work. Tried a third tool, maybe there's something here. And then they started to reimagine how we might do it. And the 4th or 5th tool we tried over the last 2 years actually fundamentally has redefined how we develop our simulations. And part of that breakthrough came from a different way of thinking about how to staff or how to make this happen. So we took our most experienced developer and we took our most fresh developers that came out of college. And it's really interesting that when you have people that have grown up at college with ChatGPT actually being a part of how they went through college, they work fundamentally different. So that wisdom, experience clashed with new ways of working was when we got the breakthrough. So we can now do projects much faster, smaller teams, reduce the risk, improve quality, and the cycle time is probably 10 times what it was before. So it requires at that level, phase 3, to think reimagine, requires a new skill set of leaders to actually redefine problems, be clear about the problem definition, and also the way that we staff and like the teams that we put together and break the old molds that the most experienced people are the best people to do the work. It's actually the combo of experience and fresh new thinking that gets the best outcomes.
Yeah, and I think that also that just the inclusive culture and the leader's job to bring both of those insights out, the most experienced person and the least experienced person, having that collaboration between the two of them. And of course, it's not just two people on the team. We're talking about, some people, have hundreds of people on their team. So, really having that culture to allow the best thinking to come out.
Yeah, and that's if I can just add to that, because it's a very unusual muscle for people that are very experienced to work in this way. So they actually have to like unlearn some of the authority that they're used to have through their expertise and embrace their problems with a new lens and partner as peers with younger, much less experienced people, but that have a new set of skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And the manager to me, it becomes more of an integrator of those professionals. And I know that when we were chatting before, that certainly came out. But there's another phrase that you all use over there at BTS and talking about getting over the hump. And what actually helps people cross that barrier from that curiosity to having more confidence.
Yes, I think it's Fredrik who coined this term, getting over the hump. We're searching for a more refined language to use, but that's where we are at the moment. It describes it really well. I think it's before you go deep into workflow redesign or reimagining what things could look like. It's the moment where you see the potential of AI to what you do every day in your work. And there are probably two parts of it. The first is like the aha moment where you're just wowed that it does something totally amazing for you in the context of what you do at work. And the second piece is realizing that it's super simple and you can do it with natural language. You don't need a machine learning scientist or a coder to build stuff for you, but you can actually do amazing things. And I think that's what we call getting over the hump, is just that moment where you have the realization that you can actually do all this stuff and uh, it just transforms what you do in the way of work. I think it's probably the most enjoyable part of my work, like either internal teams or working with clients. I was at the start of the year doing like a classic financial transformation. We've got like 14 finance systems across BTS. We're moving them down to one. And I'm sitting through the UAT sessions where they're, testing everything with the finance teams and watching all the clicks and watching all the manual entries and copying from one system to another. And then the following week, I'm showing them how it can all be done automatically, like taking invoices to be paid and watching someone do a day's worth of work in 30 minutes. And that was just like, it just blows people's mind. And then it's very hard to like put the genie back in the bottle once people have seen that and you're well on the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that genie in the bottle mode, where I think once people start to utilize it, that they're using it at, like you mentioned, they're using it at home to take pictures and get recipes, and then they come into the office and say, "Look, now how can I use it?" That excitement. I remember, I'm a father of three children. Just going home and making custom bedtime stories with my own license of Claude AI, and then coming in and saying, okay, like if I can do that at home, how can I do something more productive here at the office, and how can I change my approach of going about the work. Ivy, I think, can you go forward one more slide? There you go. Now, Fredrik, I know Ross walked over the slide. I know this is a term that you've coined a little bit. Is there anything you wanted to add to this slide before we talk a little bit more about skills?
Yeah, I think that getting over the hump is unappreciated in organizations. So many organizations do training on prompt engineering. They do training on the basic tools, but sometimes what brings the greatest breakthrough is for someone technical, somewhat technical, like Ross, to spend some time with them, showing them what's possible in a team, and then going into reimagining the workflows together. So it's this giving a little bit more nurturing to teams to actually help them see what's possible and giving them the agency to do so. And that's where we've seen breakthrough happen. A little bit more investment in the critical teams that do important work and where the prospect of where AI can have an outsized impact. And that goes back to maybe what happens before the hump, is to look at and use enterprise value mapping to see what are the parts of our business that most could benefit from AI. Where can we drive the best business model reinvention, or where could we create the most cost savings or efficiencies, or where could we get the best invention to drive revenue growth? And if you start there and then apply the over the hump approach, then you'll get faster results. So that mix of ambition and working with the teams directly to help them see what's possible so that the innovation sits with them.
Yeah, I think the role of the managers and the leaders, as well as, the executives all the way at the top, because, when we're talking about these types of AI enablement, we're not just talking about a technology like you mentioned. It's really a culture change, preparing people, making them understand. But another thing that we hear a lot is building out some of those capabilities. And I want to hear from your perspective, what capabilities seem to matter most for organizations that are starting to scale their AI beyond those pilots and pockets of success, particularly for that manager. Like, how does that manager really get the best out of their team?
Yeah, so the most profound thing about AI is that it's made knowledge free and abundant. It's as if all of us have access to all the world's PhDs at any time we want, and they don't get tired or grumpy with us. So the question is, like, if intelligence is everywhere, what's left for leaders to do? And then the ironic part is that most leaders get promoted because of their expertise. But what if their expertise don't matter as much anymore? So now we need to select the ones that are best at exploration, the ones who can stay curious in uncertainty, visibly learn in front of their team, testing their assumptions, adjusting openly when new data or perspectives emerge. The ones that can share reasoning, think strategically and transparently while evaluating trade-offs and making tough calls. So that's that whole exploration piece, and that's different than what we wanted from managers in the past. The second kind of side to it is much of the doing that leaders used to do will also be changing, because now it's more of discerning than doing. So as AI expands what's possible, leaders need to define what's desirable and what's impactful to the organization. So this means framing the right problems. Now you define a challenge. How you define a challenge determines the value that you can create for the company. The leaders also need to draw boundaries on automation to protect spaces where human judgment, ethics, and connections are non-negotiable and really important to keep. And that also requires them to redefine how people contribute and when. So when AI takes over tasks, what are the pathways for new value creation and purpose of the team members that they're working with? So that the different way of thinking in that sense. And then finally, the third big shift that we see in leaders is we need human leaders to provide more systemic intelligence. So they need to empower the edges, as Ross has been talking about before. So much of the breakthroughs happens at the edges with teams, not in centralized big thinking. So value creation starts where the work happens. So the leaders need to clear obstacles and they need to not control the outcomes. They need to reward evolution over delivery. Because the breakthroughs come through retooling and the teams getting them access to the right tools where they can celebrate experimentation and iteration and the performance that comes from that. And kind of that last part of this third point is that the networks that we have in the organization becomes even more important, and especially sharing insights across the organization and sharing the work that we're doing. So let me give you an example of this last one because I think it's very clear. I think that everyone that I know has had major breakthroughs in the productivity space using maybe just a simple tool as ChatGPT. But how often does that breakthrough and that productivity side, how often does that get shared with the team, get institutionalized with the team, change the way a team or an organization will work? So right now we have all these individual improvements in organizations, but how do we scale them to become bigger? And that becomes a big part of managers' roles to drive adoption of that.
That's great insight. We, as Ivy mentioned before, we have an AI summit that we do. And in our last AI summit, we had an organization that ran a customer service call center. And of course, AI has enabled them to speed up a lot of those things. So they first, went out and tried to build the capabilities around how to use AI effectively, how to advance your decision-making tree, and all of those types of things. Really build out those capabilities, and then, of course, what they found is they're much more productive. They had more staff than they had phone calls. And that organization said, you know what, instead of doing layoffs, we are going to encourage them to take hours out of their day to go back and learn a new role, learn what's next in my career, other than answering phones at that level 1. How do I get to that level 3 support? Or how do I move into a completely different role? And leverage that time to go back into their learning management system and advance their career. And then what they actually did is found the people that were showing up with new capabilities, were getting promoted, and some of those people that were not choosing to invest in themselves and maybe took that 2-hour break rather to do personal things, those were the people that ended up getting let go. And I think that, that's that messy conversation everybody wants to talk about. Will AI replace jobs? So this organization tried to offset that and augment that conversation with, we want to develop you, we're not trying to replace you. But, the fact of the matter is, sometimes that does happen. And sometimes, organizations can find creative ways to choose who stays and who goes. But it kind of leads me into the conversation about psychological safety. Everyone's worried. You also need to prepare your staff for those types of things with AI and help them understand the capabilities, help them understand how it fits in. Because throughout this conversation, we're talking about how does AI impact the business. So when people can really clearly identify how AI is impacting the business and not just my particular role, they feel, a lot more comfortable. But what we're really seeing is when AI starts to drive that productivity and that autonomy, the leaders, the leadership, we're talking about executive leaders now, not just frontline managers, needs to also change in how they're leading their organization, how they're redesigning work for their organization, and think about organizational performance. So I'd love to get your all feedback on how leaders and executives should show up for their staff.
Yeah, and I think as Fredrik's been saying, it's very different, and and it's a very different muscle from what we've seen in the past. Like a lot of our work for leaders is helping them to see the next level up or the enterprise picture and how the different components fit together at a level above them. And we're seeing almost the opposite. We're seeing IC CEOs, we're seeing people really trying to figure out what their workflow looks like, what their people do, how they can add more value to a client through this process, or what a team can do differently in order to increase value for the organization. Um, so it's very much different from what people have been trying to do in the past. And I think a lot of people have started the AI wave, and a lot of people spoke to our CEO, Jessica, saying the same thing. We've got to do this properly. We've got to do this top down. We've got to define the priorities and we've got to make sure everyone follows suit. And she says, like, I don't know what it can do, what it can't do, or where we should use it, where we shouldn't use it, because I'm not close enough to the work and I'm not on top of the latest technologies as much as our teams are. Um, and so I think there is like a very clear role for senior leadership in terms of setting the ambition, setting the guardrails, empowering people, modeling, practicing, vibe coding, showing that you're curious, staying on top of as much as you can. But then also there's the bottom up role as well. So empowering the front line and then scaling those as well. I think it's also like important to figure out how the organization can capture some of the benefits and the returns as well, because it's not always clear for us when we take 5 weeks building a simulation for a client down to 12 hours. Like there are a lot of different approaches you can take as a result of that. Sometimes it's really counterintuitive, and it's kind of like Jevons paradox as well. It's like when something becomes super cheap, like actually the demand goes way up. So thinking through those things and actually figuring out how to capture value at scale remains critical for the leaders of these organizations as well.
And it's interesting because a lot of boards of directors are very impatient with CEOs to find P&L impact from AI. And when I speak to CEOs of different companies, there's 3 ways that they want to see that impact. One is, can it grow our revenues faster? Secondly, can it reduce our cost, which in many cases is the number of people in the organization. And the third one is, a little counterintuitive, is can it reduce our tech spend? So many companies are finding that if you got people that are close to the problems, reimagine, they might be able to do things without their traditional software vendors, go straight to databases and cut out big tech spends, which are enabling them to have costs improvements without letting people go. So if you think about like 2 out of the 3 levers to have P&L impact are actually not about letting people go. 2 of them are like growing revenue more rapidly or reducing tech spend with other vendors.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we see the most successful organizations that are focused on that growth and aligning AI to their business model to get more growth and not cutting costs. It goes back to like the old adage, once the CEO starts thinking nothing but cost reductions, they're taking their eye off the ball and they're really going to be heading the wrong way real fast. So we have a lot of people joining us today from the HR and L&D, the talent space. So what roles should HR leaders play in enabling AI reinvention across the enterprise?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're seeing in the market now that HR and IT titles are combining. So HR and IT are getting closer together. I think the first wave of AI was very IT driven, tool driven. As Ross said earlier, 80% of the money was spent on the tools, and more and more companies are realizing that this is a big leadership behavioral challenges that needs to be done with that as well. So as we're helping our clients rethink how they do L&D, how they do talent management, how they do performance management, you name it, with AI, a surprising amount of clients have gone from about a year ago where they say, oh, we can't use AI. Don't talk to us about that. The IT processes for signing it off are way too way too stringent, to saying, oh, all our vendors have AI, so I guess we'll need to evolve and need to adjust to this. And hence, we've also seen that the capacity for IT and to approve new ways of going much faster. So first of all, HR and the talent, it needs to develop, find, and select people and leaders who can thrive in this new environment. It is not necessarily the same that thrived in the past. So what that means is changing the criteria for who you hire, who you promote, who you select for critical roles. And what we've experienced both internally and with the clients that we work is that it's not necessarily the leaders that we thought were the highest potential a few years ago that are the ones that are emerging now as the 10x impact in the organization. So you actually need to think about what types of skills, mindsets, many of the things we discussed earlier are now required that we need to put into our profiles and our systems to make sure we get the right people in the right seats and develop the people to become great in this new reality. And a lot of that requires thinking from the future back and looking at that from a talent perspective. So that creates all sorts of opportunities for us to reimagine within the space. So if we think, for example, assessment, we've been relying on psychometrics for so many years, and psychometrics are inferences made based on how people answer questions, and then we make decisions about those people based on that. Not only that, but as one of the data points, with Reimagine, we can get the truth of how the leaders actually behave, observing them in their real work using AI. So we can suddenly can do behavioral insights at scale. That changes how you look at who you like, how you develop your leaders and who you select. What's also really interesting is that suddenly simulation capabilities have become so much more important in both selection and development. So with the high level of uncertainty and complexity that we're seeing right now, being able to simulate futures, being able to simulate how the company might operate, the teams might operate in the future, or how you might operate with AI in the future, helps build capacity for complexity, systemic thinking, and actually operating in new ways that we want to work. So you can also simulate workflows, how to reimagine or new business models that you're using and help people experience what it feels like to work in these new ways. So, and of course, also help people draw the line of how it impacts the P&L. So really interesting here that for our client, we simulated how all the types of decisions that they make around AI and the productivity gains they might get from AI might impact their P&L. And what's really interesting is that when you look at it, none of them impact the P&L until you take action to reduce team sizes or hire faster into the roles that have hyper productivity to revenue growth, or reduce tech spend over here. So it's not just getting the productivity engagement. What are you doing with the extra time? What are you doing with to accelerate that? And if we go to the very far edge of possibilities, we're working with one of the big AI native companies in Silicon Valley, where we're partnering with them on to rethink how they certify their customers, which are millions a year of customers in using their technology in a digital simulation playground on their tech that the certification simulation changes based on the credentials that they have and the experiences that they have. So every single person has a unique experience to get them certified in the gap areas that we need to get them certified into. So it's really groundbreaking stuff. So it goes from kind of reimagining the processes, the talent processes, the criteria, how we hire, how we select, how we develop, all the way to reimagining how do we scale through HR and learning the ability for millions of our customers to do amazing things on our platform.
Yeah, that personalization is really amazing. That the new generative AI type of features where it can generate on the spot and do things like simulations and assessments in real time and personalized to the unique person, I think is one thing that's really helped the HR learning and talent space probably the most. I'm curious, you know, before we move on to the entire organization, you know, thinking about the HR roles, you know, who do you think is utilizing AI the best? And then if you want, go ahead and add in, you know, some of those other roles like marketing and sales and like the clients that you're working with. Who are you seeing utilize AI? I would say the most advanced.
Ross, do you want to have a go at that?
Uh, I think obviously the wave that's come first has been in tech and software, and that's just been transformative for the whole like coding software roles. Um, and then we're seeing uh, still quite, especially in HR, quite a lot of big AI. So trying to predict, trying to build machine learning models, a lot of things that work with like maybe 2 or 10 people, but struggle to get to 2,000 people or 5,000 people. So we see a lot of proofs of concept, a lot of consultants trying to build these systems, and some are working really well. Others are still like with big AI, still struggling a little bit. And then I think the ones that are really transformative are the ones who are um, really understanding what their talent is great at, seeing where the tools can support them and scale them, and like the best quote is, "We want to give all our people superpowers." Um, and I think the teams that see themselves as like, "I really want to give our people superpowers," are the ones who are really transforming their organizations. And it's not, I don't think it's in a specific role so much. I think people have focused a lot on service because AI does service pretty well. People have focused a lot on sales, but it doesn't seem to be generating that kind of transformative benefit in sales. I think the real differentiator is like when you have that ambition and you have people that you value and want to give them superpowers, that we're really seeing the benefit and the transformation. And I think we'll see the same kind of thing as we've seen in software moving across all the other functions and into knowledge work as well. And you see some CEOs like last week talking about it at Davos, the kind of impacts they're seeing in their organizations as well. And so there are early adopters who are definitely seeing it. There are people who are maybe talking about it and then rolling back a few months later. But definitely there are a lot of people who are skeptics and saying like there's going to be a productivity paradox. And we don't buy into that at all because like, we're seeing complete redesigns of workflows and 5 times, 10 times productivity in some of our teams as well. So we're totally committed to this technology transformation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the things that we see is you know, some of those pockets of departments seeing success, and then of course, you know, the CEO or COO is asking, you know, like this department is seeing all the success, you know, how can you roll that out? So I think some of the technology has been or technology partners have been a little unfair to say like the talent acquisition department might have something really cool and shiny, whereas you know somebody maybe on the talent management side that's been developed more the last 6 months. So you know some of these HR organizations are being a little unfair, but what you all talk about is really building that from the leadership down, you know, really overarching, which is why I love to have conversations with the two of you, because it's not just focused on one tech. It's, you know, really focused on that leadership layer and the strategy from the top. So would love to hear from the audience, any questions. I'm looking at the chat box as well as the Q&A. Would love to hear from you and ask Ross and Fredrik any questions that you have. This little icon reminds us how to do that. We'll take any questions. While we wait for that first one to come in, if either of you would love to share your predictions, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or 18 months down the road, where AI might be taking us next.
I've constantly been surprised about how quickly new things are possible with AI and how quickly it develops and how much better it is now than just what it was 3 to 6 months ago. at the same time, I've been constantly surprised about how slow um, big organizations are able to take advantage of what's possible now, and how many leaders feel like waiting for someone else to use it, solve it, learn about it, and don't see um, the power that they have uh, and the ability that they now have to test out new ideas, create prototypes of their ideas. Because as Ross said earlier, it's all plain language now. So if you can write it and describe it, you can vibe code it. Um, so that has been a surprise to me. I think that many small companies are popping up and being really successful with it. And that when the big companies set aside the time, help teams get over the hump, I've also been really surprised at the positive side of what teams can make happen. So I'm hoping in the next like 6 months, we will see more people feeling empowered and less intimidated and being able to imagine and create amazing things that we have not thought of before.
Yeah, I think people have been thinking of it as software and thinking of it as like SaaS that they've experienced in the last 10 years. And like the domination of SaaS has been tremendous. But this feels like something very different. It's almost, as people talk about it, like having your intern. Like, unless you give it the context and feedback and skills and figure out what tasks it can do, can't do, like it's very hard to make it work as a software. And I think like some people are waiting for it to be good enough and have the giant magic breakthrough that suddenly it can transform everything. But at the moment, it feels like the people who are really getting the wins from it are the people who can exercise judgment on the best tasks for it and like give it correction and feedback. And it's very much like having an intern on your team, in developing them, giving them context, giving them the bigger picture, and like figuring out what task they're great at doing. That allows you to scale and have like 10 people on your team instead of having to do everything on your own.
Yeah, that kind of brings me into kind of one of the things that I've always been drawn to is the AI agent. Having a team of AI agents that I treat like a colleague, not just an assistant or not like a tool, but like really developing it. If you spend X amount of hours developing somebody on your team, per week or per month, how much time should you be spending to develop an agent? That's definitely where I want to go. So maybe that's my prediction. That's where I see us going, is really treating AI like a colleague. Um, so
Oh, I have a fun story on that, David, because I was working with the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, and one of their technology leaders there, who has been leading the adoption of AI. What he said was that working with AI has made me a better manager, and I now realize all the things that I did wrong in the past and why I didn't get the outcomes that I wanted. Because the way that he's learned to work with AI, to be clear about the context, to be clear about the problem he's trying to solve, to frame it in a way that can be understood, um, to give direction of where to go about it and give feedback on the outcome in that loop. He's now applying the same skills he's learned from AI to leading his team. And his team is happier and much more productive and much more clear about what they're providing and doing. So it's really like a counterintuitive loop that goes the other way too.
that's absolutely right. I hadn't thought about it like that, because AI will do exactly what you tell it to. It's not going to perceive it on its own. I mean, granted, some tools out there do hallucinate after a while. But for those of you using some of the more advanced tools or your own that you've been given from your organization, it's going to come back with exactly as you said. And then if you apply that same skills to your team and communicating with them, it's been very interesting. So, of course, thank you everyone for attending this webinar, from AI roadmap to AI reinvention. I would love to get some closing thoughts, Ross and Fredrik, from you to put a button on this webcast.
Well, thank you, David, for like all the conversations we've had leading up to this, thinking through the the content that we presented. It seems like a really exciting time for people involved in learning, in talent, in developing the capability of our leaders, um, and we're committed to giving people superpowers in every client that we can work with, and giving them the aha moment where they see the potential of this technology and helping them figure out how they can use it to make themselves and their organization more successful. So for us, we're super pumped about 2026 and excited to try to get this technology into the hands of as many leaders and organizations as we can.
Wonderful.
So, closing remarks for me is that the single truth that I found is that I haven't single met, my words just making spaghetti here. I haven't met a single person that has said, I'm on top of it. I'm confident that I'm on top of AI, which means that every single person in the world are feeling some sort of fear of being behind at this point in time. So the only way forward is to be curious and learning, and wanting to learn, wanting to explore, and also not be afraid of showing where you are on your journey. Now, what I'm really interested in is how do we help leaders? How do we help HR? How do we help prepare for this future? So if anyone's interested in, of course, talking about how we do that with organizations, give me a shout out. But that's everywhere from rethinking what we do in leadership, what do we do in talent, to reimagining the work that we're providing with them. And let me just give you an example in the end. Um, We've had one client that said, "Oh, we should just have everyone use ChatGPT to be our coach. They know how to use it and they know how to use the prompts." But what we found is that people really use AI in coaching if it comes at a time in a learning journey where they really need to do sense making, create intentionality, practice something because they're just about to have a difficult conversation. Those are the times that they actually end up using AI. So being really thoughtful about thinking user back and how do we reimagine what we do for our leaders in a way that's most helpful to them, that's where we see the biggest impact.
Perfect. Thank you both for all of your insights. And as Fredrik said, you can find either one of these two gentlemen on LinkedIn. Or if you need to, you can also email success@Brandon Hall Group with any question you might have. We'll forward it to them. There's also a survey at the end of once you exit the screen. If you have a question, type it in there and we'll forward that as well. So if you want to connect with BTS and Ross and Fredrik, please do so. And then I think, Ivy, you have a raffle to round us out.
Yes, thank you, David and Ross and Fredrik. I'm thrilled to share that Jennifer Williamson has won $100 off a Brandon Hall Group Institute membership. Congratulations, Jennifer. I will be in touch with you shortly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.